guys, welcome back to another video all about the hip thrust, one of the best exercises for training your glutes. So the glutes are trained mostly for aesthetic gains. Everyone wants that big booty, right? But a lot of people don't realize the other benefits of having strong glutes, especially for the carryover to squats and deadlifts. First, we are going to go over the main movers of the barbell hip thrust and their role. The big gluteus maximus that helps extend the hip, something called hip extension. Here I show the difference between hip extension and hip flexion. Then we have the gluteus medius, a large fan-shaped muscle located on the posterior hip, with the main function of hip abduction or bringing your leg out away from your body. In the barbell hip thrust, the gluteus maximus is the prime mover, but the glute medius is also active and it helps with hip extension and hip abduction, so you're driving your knees outwards away from your body. The hamstrings also contribute to keep the knee stable at around 90 degrees of flexion. Squats are known for playing a major role in glute development, but a study done by Brett Contreras in 2015 shows the EMG or muscle activity during an exercise was significantly higher in a barbell hip thrust with a higher peak activation at 172% for the upper gluteus maximus versus 84.9% for the back squat. The lower gluteus maximus, 216% for the barbell hip thrust compared to back squat at 130%. So the barbell hip thrust might be a much better way to target the glutes directly compared to a back squat. So getting into the barbell hip thrust setup. So depending on your gym, you'll have an actual hip thrust machine or you'll have to use a bench to perform the hip thrust correctly. You will want to set up a bench against a firm object or a wall so that the bench has no chance to slide. Taking a bar from the squat rack and placing it on the ground with plates on each side, you will then want to make sure that the bar has some pad of some kind, as it will be very uncomfortable on your pelvis. Then sit down on the ground and roll the bar so it's hovering above your quads, with your feet shoulder width, a comfortable distance away from the bench where you can push your feet into the floor. At the same time, use your shoulder blades as leverage to pick yourself off the floor. Then back your feet up slightly to get your legs at 90 degrees of flexion and about just wider than shoulder width. With the bar sitting between the crease of your hips, you will then want to push the bar into your thighs but not actually lifting up the bar so that the bar stays put and doesn't roll around during the movement. Starting with your hips about 6 inches from the ground, you will want to take a big breath in, bracing your core, or the cue, tucking your ribs down. You will then drive through your hips, creating hip extension. You will want to think about driving through your hips and posteriorly tucking your pelvis at the top. In other words, tucking your tailbone. Now this is tricky. You want to posteriorly tuck your pelvis while pushing your ribs down at the same time, preventing that low back extension, creating pain and potential injury. When thrusting up, you'll also want to keep your chin tucked to keep your spine in alignment. You are then going to be thinking about spreading your foot across the floor. You want to push through the whole foot, especially the big toe. The big toe kind of talks to the glutes. It might sound crazy, but if you try it out, I guarantee you'll have more activation of your glutes. As I talked about earlier, we also want those knees to stay out over our toes, so we're going to externally rotate our hips by taking our feet and gripping the floor, thus activating the gluteus maximus and the gluteus medius to its fullest potential. Make sure to get full hip extension at each rep, as this will make sure that you're activating your gluteus maximus to its highest degree. If you're training this exercise for hypertrophy for the glutes and hamstrings, I recommend getting at least a 1 to 3 second pause at the top of each rep. If your goal is strength, there's no need for a pause, but we do need to get that full hip extension each and every rep. Make sure to also control the negative or the lowering phase of the bar for at least 1 to 2 seconds. The negative will really stretch the glutes and hamstrings, maximizing this exercise's benefits. This is an exercise that can be done with heavy weights. Your glutes are one of the most powerful muscles on your body. A rep range of 3 to 12 reps is acceptable here to progress in strength and size of the glutes. Now getting into some common errors. If you feel your hamstrings dominating the movement, you are likely having your feet too far away from the bench and need to bring your feet closer to the bench. If you feel your quads, your feet are probably placed too close to the bench. So again, make sure that you have that 90 degree of knee flexion to make sure this exercise is targeting your glutes. Another common error is when your knees start collapsing inward. Remember to drive the knees out by digging your feet into the floor and abducting the hips. the glutes will be more engaged in the lift. If you ever feeling your low back in this movement, stop immediately. You probably have bad core engagement or pelvis tuck, and I recommend starting with a barbell glute variation from the floor first, decreasing risk of injury. Getting into some variations of the hip thrust now. The banded hip thrust. Start by placing a band just above your knees, then execute the same hip thrust form. The band provides an extra component to the lift by increasing the difficulty of abduction, so your glute medius will be working harder to push your knees out to the side. Then we have the single leg dumbbell hip thrust to isolate one glute at a time. Placing the dumbbell on the working leg, perform the hip thrust, isolating one glute. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully that helped out your hip thrust. If you found any value at all, please like and subscribe and smash that notification bell so you don't miss another video. But that's going to be it for today. Take care, guys.